Hello everyone, this is Pal Ponder on Weather. In this update, we've got enhanced risk severe weather setups over the next 3 days that includes large hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. Plus, we've got a tropical storm that has formed. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Happy Saturday out there. Hope everyone is enjoying your Memorial weekend. We got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of areas that have really nice weather, but there's definitely areas that are of concern over the next several days that you need to know about. So let's kind of walk you through the details. You want to follow along. The date is above my head there. So let's look at the overall synoptic setup for this morning of this powerful mid to upper level jet streak that's going to be coming across. I think today, as it moves through, we've got these little short waves out ahead of it. It's going to be more of a high wind-based threat set up for portions of the Dakotas. But definitely as we get into tomorrow, you can definitely see this powerful jet streak really amplifies over the central and northern plains, especially over to Nebraska. It maxes out all the way up into 100 knots in the upper levels. That is some serious stuff, guys. The air is going to be rotating too at the same time, so we could be looking at more of a tornado threat, especially as we get into tomorrow. But that's a lot of lift in the upper atmosphere as this swings through all the way parts of the Dakotas into Iowa, especially into Minnesota, going into tomorrow, and then it's going into Monday too. So there's definitely 3 days in a row there where this thing goes negative tilt and going to be more of a high wind-based threat today. I think then it transfers over to a hail, high wind threat, and then also tornadoes for Sunday going into your Monday time frame. Because at the same time, we've got this overall 850 millibar jet stream at the kind of the lower levels, about 5,000 feet up in the atmosphere. Again, today is more of a kind of a high base wind threat over portions of the Dakotas. But as you get it to tomorrow, with that low level jet tapping into some of that energy at the surface, some of these are going to be more of a surface-based setup as we get into portions of the Dakotas, especially in Nebraska, heading into Iowa, and then again into Minnesota. As we get into Sunday time frame. So we got the next 3 days of these areas of concern for more of a high wind-based threat, and then transferring over to a hail and a tornado threat as we get into Sunday, going into Monday time frame. So let's highlight those areas of concern throughout the next the Storm Prediction Center setup for today. We do have that enhanced risk of severe storms for today on your Saturday, May the 28th, of all the way into portions of the Dakotas. That extends into portions of Nebraska here. We do have some little marginal storms that could try to amplify in the heat of the day. Some of those could turn severe up in portions along the northeast coast here. And then this dry line setup of course out here into the Texas Panhandle, where storms could start to fire in the heat of the afternoon. But yes, the main threat for today is going to be these high wind-based wind threat. So some of these winds could really be packing a punch. You see, they've got a 10% significant hatched risk for high winds today. You're talking upwards to 74 miles an hour, or potentially some of these can be greater. And these areas of northern Nebraska, as well as pretty much almost the entire state of South Dakota, is going to be under the gun with these very high winds, especially as we get into 5, 6, 7 o'clock this afternoon. Of some of those 70 and 80 mile per hour wind gusts is definitely not out of the question with this particular setup. And some of these winds could be on the strong side over here into portions of the Northeast, as well as if the cap does break into the Texas Panhandle, they could be on the stronger side as well. But as we transition into tomorrow for your Sunday, yes, again, another enhanced risk over portions of Nebraska headed into South Dakota. This gets into Iowa now and all the way up into Minnesota, with another slight risk expanding all the way almost into the Canadian border here, with that low-level jet that's really going to be amplifying as it comes across. And as it does, it's got a lot of lift associated with it. And when that jet streak ramps up to 80, 90, 100 knots, cold air aloft, that's going to spell trouble with those large hail producers. And that's an extreme area of an enhanced risk, 10% hatched risk area into portions of Nebraska, headed into South Dakota. This gets into Minnesota, especially as you head into portions of Iowa here, this whole area is definitely going to be under the gun. And this right in the middle, that's about a 30% chance of seeing some of those large hail producers. This is that golf ball size hail, the ping pong size hail. Some of these could be some tennis ball size hail. And with this particular atmosphere, some of these cloud tops reaching 55, 60,000 feet up in the atmosphere. Yeah, not out of the question. We could be seeing some isolated baseball type size hail in this particular setup. But again, as we extend the view, this again, the wind threat is going to be pretty prevalent over these same areas where they do have that enhanced risk. So yes, not only are you going to be having that hail threat, you're going to have that wind threat over portions of Nebraska, heading into far extreme northwestern Iowa as we get into that Sunday time frame. But then again, at the lower levels, like I showed you, more shear is going to be coming into play. And as it taps into that jet streak, that could spell trouble, more surface-based setup by then, and we could be looking at a 5% setup for isolated tornadoes up here into portions of Nebraska, going into Minnesota and Iowa, going all the way up into eastern parts of the Dakotas here on your Sunday time frame. And then there's the setup for Monday as this continues to push through, and as it pushes off to the east, man, it could really start to bow out with these straight line winds, and this could almost set up a derecho type setup as we have an extreme area of a large area, an extended area of that 10% significant threat for hail and wind with this particular setup, all the way extending into northern portions of Oklahoma, Kansas, all the way extending into Nebraska, Iowa, into Minnesota here. Going into far extremes, North Dakota. So as these storms push out during the day on Monday, yeah, we could be looking at some pretty significant straight line winds. And if these congeal together and form a solid squall line moving across, this could be a derecho type setup, and extending those winds and amplifying those winds to 80, if not 90 miles an hour is definitely probably not out of the question heading on your day for your Monday. So let's take a look at the overall HRRR radar for the next 48 hours or so. So here's where we set up this morning for 9 o'clock in the morning. We see that cold front finally pushed off the East Coast. So as it does, we've got some instability on the backside with that marginal risk for severe storms up there into portions of northern New Jersey there. That's going to be coming across into portions of Rhode Island, headed into Connecticut, through Vermont, New Hampshire, going into Maine today. We also have another little short wave setting up over portions of Wisconsin, but the main setup for today is going to be portions of coming out of Wyoming, especially headed into the Dakotas as we get into that 5, 6, 7 o'clock time frame. And that could be some straight line winds of those 70 plus, if not 80 mile per hour winds coming across into far southern portions of South Dakota, getting into central South Dakota as we get into that 7, 8 o'clock time frame. And this could be a pretty nasty squall line coming across. It's not really a tornado threat today. It's more of a straight line wind threat coming across the Dakotas. And then we kind of see sporadic showers with that more troughs just coming in for the Pacific Northwest, with another fairly significant strong cold front coming in on the backside. So yes, as we transition into your Sunday time frame and extend the view, we see all that tropical moisture down here in the Bahamas heading into Florida. That's just going to continue for the next several days. But yes, definitely the main concern as we get into your Sunday time frame, as we move through to that 5, 6, 7 o'clock time frame, man, that is going to really start to amplify over the Nebraska, then swinging in through the Dakotas again, and now going to be over portions of Iowa. This is about 10 o'clock time frame, 10 o'clock in the evening on your Sunday. Those could be rotating with some tornadoes, as well as some large hail and that damaging wind threat as it pulls through. And look at all that blue on the backside. That's snow, guys. I know the calendar says the end of May, but we still got some colder air aloft, and some pretty strong cold fronts can be pushing down. So we're still talking about snow into portions of Idaho, getting into Wyoming to end the month of May, because that's a lot of blue showing up on the map with some of that snow ringing out in the higher elevations. So as we continue to expand, and let's take a look at the overall updrafts. This kind of gives you an idea of where some of the larger hail may be, or where some of these areas that could be rotating. So there's points of interest here, portions of far extreme Kansas, heading into northern, central northern Nebraska here, heading into that northwestern part of Iowa, southern Minnesota, and then all the way up here into northern parts of Minnesota. These areas that have the higher numbers, this is you're a little bit more susceptible to seeing some of that larger hail, and the area will be rotating. So that puts you under the gun to seeing some of those isolated tornadoes as we get throughout the next 2 days up here into the high plains. But as we extend the view and head into your Tuesday time frame, again, we've got that enhanced risk for today, tomorrow, as well as into Monday. And this just continues at ahead of a cold front, a pretty strong cold front. Now the setup's going to be with a slight risk for severe weather in northern parts of Oklahoma, getting into portions of southeastern Kansas here, as well as northwestern portions of Missouri, with that severe weather setup pushing through. So let's take a look at the overall European model at the surface. Let's start it off about Monday, because that's where we left off at that last HRRR setup. So here's Monday. So this is that severe weather setup over the northern plains, and here's that deepening surface low getting into the afternoon over portions of Nebraska. This actually congeals together, so this could be forming a pretty nasty squall line, you know, setting up over Minnesota, over Iowa, and then fishtailing all the way back down into Kansas, extending all the way into northern portions of Oklahoma here. And then that'll be on the day on your Monday, and then transition into Tuesday. There's that severe weather setup that'll extend further south into Oklahoma, getting into Kansas, going through Missouri, heading into portions of Iowa. And this, again, ahead of a cold front, it's not going to be able to push that far south. So this time of year, cold fronts only make it so far south, so it almost kind of stalls out over the middle sections of the country and pushes more instability further off into the east. You can see the surface low by then well up into Canada. This won't be until Thursday. So I think the severe threat does come down, but then more of a rain threat setting up over Missouri, and then that will extend over into the mid-Atlantic states as we get into your Friday time frame. So now let's take a look at the overall temperature anomalies of where we stand. So we've got that basically that ridge of high pressure today that's just going to be dominating, coming back over the central plains. That's going to set up the stage for that severe threat, because we got a pretty significant trough on the backside of this system. So all the cooler conditions continue to remain over the Pacific Northwest, even some deepening purples there. That's why you're seeing snow showing up on the surface maps, because we got some pretty cold air for this time of year, and it's still cold enough to snow in the upper levels. But out ahead of it, you can see why we have that severe threat, because we've got plenty warmth out ahead of it. And then you got that clash on the backside with that pretty significant trough coming through. And then as we transitioned into Monday, going into Tuesday, there's that cold front setting up at the midsection of the country. It's going to be cold enough into Colorado, into Kansas, and there's that cold front. It only is going to be extending so far south. So you got all the warmer conditions by then further to the south, but then all the cooler conditions back behind that cold front, kind of wiping out more of the severe threat, setting up more of a rain threat. But it doesn't get much into Texas, I don't think, unless it has some sort of outflow boundary to keep the storms alive going into Wednesday night time frame. But as you wake up into Thursday, that ridge of high pressure will be just dominating portions of the southeast, with those cooler conditions trying to push in the middle section of the country and kind of wiping out the severe threat as we get towards the end of the week. So now let's take a look at the tropics, because we do have some action happening down here into the Caribbean, especially out here into the Eastern Pacific. I want to highlight this feature down here, way down on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. That actually is at the first tropical storm of the season. It is, in fact, on the Pacific side. It's named Tropical Storm Agatha, and its conditions are pretty ripe down here for rapid development. So as we walk you through time, this really starts to amplify as we get deeper into the weekend. And you can see this surface low, it almost drops it down to about a 983 millibar hurricane. So this is expected to rapidly intensify into the first hurricane of the season on the Pacific side, and expected to get all the way up to 100 mile per hour hurricane. And this makes impact onto Central America there. And then as it does, a lot of indications, it tries to cross over into the southern portions of the Bay of Campeche. In fact, the National Hurricane Center went ahead on their 5-day advisory, put a 20% chance of this crossing over and potentially trying to reform again on the Atlantic side. So it's one of those indications where if the surface low is able to remain intact, then if it does redevelop into the Gulf of Mexico, it will keep the name Agatha. But if it wipes out over the mountains, which is more likely a case scenario, get sheared across over the mountains, and any remnants that might be coming across back into the Gulf of Mexico. And if it does try to reform, as a lot of the models are now trying to indicate, but this won't be until beyond day 5, right? So this is still a ways away. So beyond day 5, it tries to merge back into the Gulf of Mexico, putting it on the Atlantic side. And this would be like 1,004 millibar low pressure. And again, the time frame is Thursday. So that's beyond 5 days. That's 5-6 days from now. And that's why the National Hurricane Center went ahead and has that 20% chance of this thing trying to form down the road. So as we move the needle, we've got those cold fronts coming down through the central part of the US, right? So as the cold front pushes, it's going to keep this thing pretty low, and it's actually going to steer this thing if whatever remnants may be coming out of it. So definitely, if you got plans in the Yucatan, the Cozumel, Playa del Carmen, those areas into Cancun, I would definitely pay attention to this setup, because this looks like a fairly significant rainmaker, if anything, and this could potentially push into the Gulf and maybe head towards Florida, but that won't be until the 7 to 10 day time frame. So, but if we take a look at the overall setup on the precipitable water imagery, yeah, we can see these deep purples, right? So we got all these deep purples down here into Central America. That's where the storm will really amplify. You can see these blues trying to show up in the far left-hand corner of your screen. That's when it becomes a hurricane with all that deep tropical moisture on the center with very heavy rain. And then the likely scenario, this probably gets just wiped out over the mountains. Most of them do. Some of them can cross over and keep the low-level surface intact. But if it does, that'll emerge back into the Gulf of Mexico and put all that deep tropical moisture into the southern Gulf by then. Again, this is about 7 days out, but the steering currents, and there's actually a lot of shear in the Gulf of Mexico as well. So if anything, this would be more of an east side loaded setup and pushed a lot of the tropical moisture or whatever may be left in the 7 to 10 day time frame into Florida. So if you're in Florida, if you're in the Yucatan, you definitely need to pay high alert to this particular setup, especially as we get deeper into the middle of next week, going into next weekend. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.